I recently heard one of the most disgusting political statements uttered by a politician recently. I was going, before I opine, let me just play the statement for you.
Here's what galls me. I don't like these attacks on the Department of Justice, the FBI, the IRS, as if they are somehow anti-U.S. agencies. Those agencies keep this democracy in check. It keeps them afloat. They provide the checks and they provide the balances.
This is Democratic Congressman Kweisi Mfume. I can't really say his name. Kweisi Mfume, it'll be up here on the screen. I'm probably mispronouncing it, it's very hard to say. Who is from Maryland, saying that the FBI, as you saw in that clip, and other agencies like them, provide the checks and the balances of our democracy. And he also said that these attacks paint the FBI and agencies like them as anti-American. Well, I've got news for this Democratic congressman and every other person whose philosophy conforms to the kind of governance and the kind of behavior that we've seen from the FBI and generally the deep state over the past few decades. Forget the past few years. Most people are just now coming to the party of understanding that the deep state is a corrupt entity within our government that not only tries to disrupt the behaviors of certain politicians they don't like, but also effectively has ran our government since the progressive era birthed it after sort of the publication of Woodrow Wilson's essay, The Study of Administration in 1887. This has been going on for a very, very long time, over 100 years, and the machinery kicked in the early 1900s, and things have been going downhill since then. So I have to remind this congressman, and all of you, of course, why you don't even need to have what has been going on recently to believe the FBI and agencies like them are anti-American, because frankly, they are. And I must say, this comment comes in the context of Congressman Jim Jordan having a committee to investigate different parts of the government for corruption and political favoritism. And that's why the Democratic Party is having this knee-jerk reaction towards it. Now, need I remind all of you of the FBI's history? Need I remind all of you that the FBI ran a program in the late 60s, early 70s called COINTELPRO, in which they literally, and they admit this too, in a set of hearings that happened when this was exposed by a group of good citizens, the FBI waged psychological warfare against political dissidents whose viewpoints they did not agree with and whose viewpoints they believed threatened national security. The anti-war movement, sort of the Black Panther Party, the many other sort of student groups happening across universities. The FBI quite literally planted fake news stories to make them hate each other. They went in and they did assassinations. They basically killed Fred Hampton. This is an open secret. People know this basically by now. They went in and tried to put plans in these organizations to cause internal strife. They did this, and they had so many different targets. And this program was so vast that we don't even know how many people they targeted and how wide the reach was. That's how vast this effort was. Need I remind you that the CIA is known for having black sites across the world where they disappear people and they execute them illegally, and the CIA has been involved in regime changes in numerous countries, overthrowing sovereign governments to reinforce the geopolitical order that America has had this sort of false interest, not a real interest, a false interest in ensuring at the behest of the UN and those kind of folks. Need I remind you of the fact that these agencies, let's talk about the FBI's cousins. The NSA has quite literally been exposed several times for roving data collection services where they basically collect anything and everything they can suck up like a vacuum, even if it's on American citizens. This is out there, this has been exposed, first by Snowden and of course by other people as well. Need I remind this congressman as well about the philosophical problem with his statement? Need I remind him that the FBI, the NSA, the CIA, all these agencies have absolutely nothing to do with checks and balances. Checks and balances are a filtration system built into the political structure of the republic, which makes it harder for the passions of the majority, the passions of the populism, of the population, to overtake the mechanisms of government, which was the key flaw of democracy that Athens, Greece understood, which is one of the reasons why our founders were so so revolting against the idea of democracy. They did not want America to be that because they understand that the majority is not more correct than the minority. What is correct is truth. And truth can only be found through this deliberate process that all of us can undertake by using our reason, but that can best happen when there are fences, when there are barriers, Lockean terms, around the political structures. That's what checks and balances are. They are literally a precondition for a supposed political environment where man can go ahead and pursue his potential without having internal strife within the government, so much so that it falls apart. But this congressman seems to believe that one branch of the government is the entire check and balance of the government. The FBI, CIA, NSA all belong to the executive branch. Now, as I have mentioned before on this channel, what is important is not the argument someone makes. What is important is what the argument that someone makes presumes. As in, what has to be true for that argument to make sense. So if I say the pencil is on the ground, for an example, well, a few things have to be true for that argument to make sense. A, the pencil has to exist. B, the pencil has to be located somewhere. And C, there has to be a ground somewhere for the pencil to be on. Now, these may seem like very elementary things. Well, of course, Christian, but you have to understand, if the ground didn't exist, if the pencil didn't exist, if none of those three things I mentioned existed or were correct, then my statement would necessarily be false. Always see what lies beneath a proposition rather than taking it as face value and responding to it on those merits alone, because what lies beneath will be far more instructive to you both intellectually and morally than what is taken at face value. Also, be on the lookout for this. Whenever you hear the phrase national security uttered by anybody, especially someone in power, you should expect a subsequent erosion of rights. Why did the NSA collect your data without having a warrant in the name of national security? Why did the FBI try to destabilize and subvert the peaceful activities of Americans exercising their First Amendment rights in the name of national security? I can keep going on and on and on. Why did Barack Obama execute a American citizen on foreign soil without giving him due process? Because of national security. National security is basically the 21st century's scare word that has been used to justify more atrocities than I think have been justified by and under any other word in history. It is an emotional phrase meant to evoke passion in the subject that hears it, as opposed to being a word that is meant to convey a substantive concept, which is what words are supposed to do. So you can see our languages have been hijacked here by the national security state for their purposes. And instead of conveying a rational concept, it simply makes you scared. And when you scare people, they are more than likely to give up the rights that they have endemic to their nature. And I don't know about you all, but I would rather prefer dangerous freedom to peaceful slavery any day of the month. Be very skeptical of anyone who claims that they are fighting for national security. That is an abstraction. That is a term almost always used to justify terrible things. And it's not an idea that conveys a substantive thought. It is an idea that conveys pure emotion, pure passion. Be on the lookout. Now, what does the statement of this Democratic congressman actually imply about his philosophy of government? Assuming he even has one. I'm being charitable because since he cannot even differentiate between a basic feature of the American style of government, which is the checks and balances, I'm highly skeptical that he has any philosophy of government. But let's be charitable and say that he does. What is presumed by his philosophy of government? What's presumed is that the executive branch, the administrative branch of government, is the most important and consequential branch of government. This belief was not just stumbled into upon by this man. This belief quite literally characterizes the past 120 plus years of progressivism that America has been suffering from for a very, very long time. Think about this. There's not a single generation alive right now that was not raised under some kind of progressive, leftist, social, and political policy. For my generation, I'm Gen Z, I'm 23. For my whole lifetime, we have been raised under Social Security. For my parents' lifetime, they were raised under Social Security. This idea that you have this safety net provided by stealing funds from other people to fund your life, and that there's a moral obligation for random strangers to help you. That's what Social Security actually is. And for my parents' lifetime and for my lifetime, we have been raised under this and we have accepted it as a given. But pre-1930s, Social Security wasn't a thing. Hundreds of years of generations of Americans had nothing to do with Social Security until, again, not even the past 100 years. Social Security is actually relatively new. But this philosophy presumes the most important branch of government is the executive. Progressivism. What did Woodrow Wilson say in the study of administration? He said it is time to move beyond the constitutional question and to consider how to actually administer the government. And the progressives of the progressive era imported tyrannical ideas from Germany, particularly from Otto von Bismarck's style of government, which was a centralized style of government, where the government managed almost everything in that society. And they said, let's apply this to American society. So what did they do? They built out the executive branch to make it more powerful, make it stronger, give it more regulatory power so that the administrators could run the country and deal with the intimate details of particular laws and ideas, as opposed to the people duly elected to the Congress who are supposed to have a role in running our government. The philosophy that underlies what this congressman said is the philosophy of centralized planning, which also presumes that the benevolent expert has the answers to society's problems. So when he says the FBI keeps a check on our democracy, well, in some sick, perverse, and roundabout way, he's actually correct. Because the deep state, also known as the managerial state or the administrative state, does keep a check on our republic in a way that is illicit and goes beyond the bounds of what they're supposed to do. That happens all the time. Look at the history of the FBI. Not even COINTELPRO. The FBI quite literally knew the Steele dossier was nonsense, solicited it from a former Clinton operative. And then when the entire lid was blown, after they had shared stories with the media, nothing. People get fired, and the same people who pushed the lie get hired for cushy spots on CNN and NBC. This just keeps going on and on and on. So yes, there is a check on our republic by these foul agencies, but they're not the check that's legitimized under the Constitution, and nor are they a check that the American people should accept. My friends, we need a revolution of the mind. We need a revolution of the mind that will bring thinking in the West, not just in America, but in the West, because I do see America as the guiding light of Western civilization because of our emphasis on the nature of the individual and his freedom and all that kind of stuff. We need a revolution that will bring people in the West closer to first principles, to presuppositional reasoning, logical thinking, rationality, which will then allow them to move social and cultural conversations in a healthy direction that will then enable people to understand some of the key questions that underlie all of this. What is good government? What is justice? What is the proper way to talk about politics? Every single thing that we're seeing in our culture that has to do with a failure of political leadership or a failure of moral leadership, more often than not, can be attributed to, at least in part, a lack of critical thinking. A lack of critical thinking is severely impacting the growth of Western civilization. It's severely impacting our ability to navigate certain concepts. And for most Americans, it's severely impacting their understanding of the Constitution and our structure of government, so much so that it is allowing such statements like these, which in the revolutionary era would have been met with great corrective force. It's allowing statements like these to go unchallenged and to persist, when in all reality, they should violate our sense of security as Americans. A revolution of the mind would bring us forward, bring us closer rather, towards a better style of government, because it would cause the electorate to demand more of their leaders. And most importantly, it would enhance the ability for us to have coherent political conversations that then get ahead of people like this getting into office. We need a revolution of the mind, my friends. And I encourage you to be a part of that revolution by subscribing to this channel, liking this video, sharing this video, commenting on this video. Do whatever you can to get our message out there. My friends, also, if you want to donate to me, you can donate to my Patreon, my PayPal, my locals. All of that is in the comment section down below. I love you guys so much, and please stay pensive. Bye, everyone.